Om Parthaya Pradibodhidam Bhagavata Narayanena Swayam Vyasena Gradhidam Purana Munina Madhye Mahabharatam Advaidam Radavarshinim Bhagavadim Ashtadashadhyayinim Ambatva Manusandadhami Bhagavad Gita Bhavadveshinim Yam Brahma Varunendra Rudramarudastunnandi Divyaistavaihi Vedai Sangapadakramopaniषदैः गायन्ति यं सामगाः ध्यानावस्थित तद्गतेन मनसा पश्यन्ति यं योगिनो यस्यान्तं न विदुःसुरासुरगणाः देवाय तस्मै नमः. As you may remember, we were discussing the 14th chapter, the 9th verse, and after almost 5 weeks of interval, we are resuming the classes, so it may take some time for many of our friends to come back to the class. So the 9th verse we discussed in the last session. Sattvam sukhe sanjayadi rajakarmani bharada jnanam avrutyadu tama pramade sanjayatyuda. So the simple principle is this. Of course, we are discussing the dynamics of gunas, the fundamental human temperaments and characteristics. So we have to understand, and the commentators make it very clear, that these gunas cannot be physically verified. They are not visible. We can only understand through inference, through the external temperaments and characteristics and emotions and feelings that we find in the personality of a human being. We may come to a conclusion whether this person has a predominance of Sattvaguna, rajoguna or Tamoguna. Otherwise, these gunas are very subtle. So now in the coming verses, Lord Krishna is giving a brief description of how these gunas manifest as different characteristics, different temperaments, different tendencies and emotions. So the 10th verse, of course we already completed the 9th verse. The simple principle is Sattvaguna, which is the highest, the most sublime, the most advanced, the most refined characteristic of any human personality. It has a tendency to get attached to happiness. So you find this verse, in the previous verse you find Tatra Sattvam Nirmalatvat Prakashakam Anamayam Sukha Sangena Badhnadi Jnana Sangena Chanakha. So it has the characteristic of serenity, peace and happiness, and the translations may sometimes create confusion. A person who is endowed with Sattvaguna will be attached to sukha, enjoyment or happiness. That could be the implication, but there is a possibility of misunderstanding. So the commentators make it very clear. Here sukha doesn't mean happiness. Sukha means a kind of inner serenity, which is not the same as happiness or joy as we understand in empirical language. It means a sense of equilibrium, serenity, peace, equanimity of mind. So a person endowed with Sattvaguna will have a natural tendency to seek a kind of inner poise, inner equilibrium, level-headedness, or a balanced state of mind. So that's the implication. Then the rajoguna attached to success, activity, dynamism and so on. Tamoguna, it is characterized by a total lack of wisdom, a discerning wisdom, and also misunderstanding, laziness and so on. Now we begin with the 10th verse which we are going to discuss today. This also we actually touched upon, but we will repeat. Tamas chamaschabhivuya sattvam bhavati bharata rajas sattvam tamaschaiva tamas sattvam rajastadha. What it essentially means is, when you find in a person some sattvic qualities, what we mean is that person will be more or less self-restrained, self-controlled, will have a serene, peaceful, detached, contented attitude towards others. Now, at that time, Tamoguna and Rajoguna are not absent in him, but they become subservient to Sattvaguna. That's why Sattvam, Rajaha, Tamaha, Cha Abhibhuya means when Sattvaguna becomes manifest in a person, then what happens is his Rajoguna and Tamoguna will be subservient, will be covered, will be almost non-functional. Tamoguna is characterized by laziness, confusion, misapprehension, and so on, inertness. So the person will have this laziness, but when he attains more and more sattvic qualities, the laziness, confusion, all these will slowly disappear or decrease gradually. So also his tendency to become hyperactive, too much of action. We are going to discuss the characteristics of Rajoguna will be discussed very soon. So when you have a lot of sattvic qualities, the first symptom is you will have a sense of inner fulfillment, inner contentment, which according to commentators is called Charidarthyada, Kritagrityada, Nikritarthada. Three terms are used in the commentaries. Kritagrityada implies you do something and as a result of it, you get the feeling, well, I have done something which I should have done, which I ought to have done. So along with an action also comes a feeling of inner contentment, inner fulfillment, inner completeness. So that is Kritakrityada, means what is Kritya, what is to be done, that you have done. And it may be your own private feeling, but you will feel it intensely in your mind. Kritarthada means you have attained something that you are trying to attain, that you should attain. So this will give a sense of inner feeling, inner contentment and happiness. Similarly, when a person is showing a dominant character of Rajoguna, he will be hyperactive. And he will be lazy, but that the laziness will be subservient to this activism. And this discerning wisdom also will take a back seat. So Sattvaguna creates a kind of inner discerning wisdom. Rajoguna leads to hyperactivism, and Tamoguna leads to laziness and inertness. This also we discussed briefly. Now we are beginning in today's session. The first verse we are going to discuss is 11-1, which is now being discussed. Sarvadvareshu dehesmin prakasha upajayate jnanam yada tada vidyad vivurdham sattvam ityuda. So sarvadvareshu. So dwara, the word dwara actually means door. It also means a vehicle, an instrument through which you act. So all these senses in our body-mind complex, our 5 senses of perception, 5 senses of action. I mean the eyes with which you see, the ears with which you hear, the skin by which you touch and know things, and also smell and taste. All these 5 senses of perception, and also the instruments that we use for different activities, and also mind and intellect. All of them are called dwaras, mean opening doors or openings. Sarvadvareshu dehi asmin prakasha. Prakasha he means light. The translation will say light. What light here means is serenity, wisdom, or this inner insight, a kind of insight that you naturally develop as a result of spiritual progress. So, in other words, when you want to judge whether a person has got sattvic quality, you can watch for yourself. This man is not lazy because there is no Tamoguna in him or it is subservient. He is not inactive because he is capable of action. But he has an ability to restrain himself, restrain his senses, restrain his thoughts, his actions. So this kind of self-control or self-restraint is the most predominant characteristic of a person endowed with Sattvaguna. It is a transcendental quality. Actually, the highest goal in Vedanta is to go beyond all the three. But you can transcend all the three gunas only when you first get established in Sattvaguna. Because from Sattvaguna you can transcend all the three gunas. So, this is a very interesting verse. Sarvadvareshu dekesmin prakasha upajayate. Prakasha means light. Light is symbolic of knowledge, wisdom, serenity, Sattvaguna and so on. Jnanam yada tada vidyat vivurdham sattvam ityuda. So, when you have a predominance of Sattvaguna, what happens is you feel a kind of inner fulfillment, happiness and completeness and a joy. The joy is not happiness as such, but rather it is a form of inner contentment and inner fulfillment. And then this 12th verse is very important, is supposed to be one of the most important verses describing the dynamics of human temperaments. It describes the characteristics of rajoguna, which is the most commonplace characteristic of every individual. Lobha pravrittihi arambhaga karmanam ashamas prha rajasi edani jayante vivurdhe bharadashapa. So what happens, or what are the visible symptoms or characteristics of a person, an individual who has got rajoguna? Rajoguna is not bad, because you can never reach Sattvaguna except going through rajoguna. But then rajoguna itself is good, is necessary, but is at its own limitations. It is not in itself complete. So what are the characteristics? Lobha is what the first characteristic. Lobha actually means, suppose you have money, you are very rich, still because of greed you want more and more money, more and more wealth. You have plenty of it, still you are not satisfied. That particular tendency in Sanskrit is called lobha, means greed. The word used next is sprha, is another word is used here in the same verse, sprha. Sprha is a related characteristic but different. You have no money, so you seek money. So you are seeking something which you don't already have. That is sprha. You have plenty of something, but you are not willing to share with others. It is called lobha. So these are two important words used here. Frequently, in translations, you may find this distinction is not clearly made here. So, lobha pravrittihi. Pravritti here doesn't necessarily mean action. It means hyperactivism, a tendency to be always active to the point of being incapable of keeping quiet. when activity itself becomes a kind of disease, second nature. People who tell you, well, I can't keep quiet for a minute. It is not a good quality, it is actually a problem. So, a tendency to be always hyperactive. Actually, hyperactivism is a characteristic, is a symptom of restlessness. When the senses are restless, they seek some orientation. So you have to be always active all the time. Now, this is a natural tendency of people endowed with rajoguna. Maybe bipolar problems, And one end you become hyperactive, on the other hand you become depressed. So, lobha pravritti arambha. Arambha means beginning. It means beginning. What it means is you want to look for a new task, a new duty, a new action all the time. Looking for a new way of engaging yourself. That is called arambha. So, then karmanam ashama spruha. So, karmanam arambha means always you want to do something new. That's not because you are looking for a higher purpose or higher goal, because you are incapable of remaining steady in one particular activity, in one particular goal or task. So it's called karmanam arambha, karmanam ashamaha. Ashama is also one important thing. That is, you can never stop doing anything. Always taking up a new task is arambha, and not being able to stop doing anything. That's a real problem actually. It can make a person very tired and hyperactive. So these are important things. So these are some of the characteristics, extreme characteristics of hyperactivism. Rajasya edani jayende vivurdhe bharadashapha. So this verse is supposed to be a very important verse from this standpoint, because it gives a glimpse into the dynamics of human character. Only lobha means you have plenty of something, you want to hoard it, you don't want to give to others, and you are always seeking for and more. It's called lobha. And then spruha. Well, spruha is sometimes excusable. But you have no money, you are seeking money. It's understandable. But lobha is a great problem. Greed. Again, one cannot keep quiet. It should be always active. Remember, it is not the characteristic of spiritual advancement. Some people tell you, I cannot keep quiet for a minute. I should always do something. That's actually a problem of the mind. So, one should be able to be active. Also, one should be able to remain away from action. Otherwise, what is called karmanam ashamaha means not being able to stop doing work. Means always the senses and mind are restless, unhappy. So, it seeks some engagement. Without some engagement, mind cannot remain satisfied. That's a characteristic of rajoguna. The 13th verse, aprakasho apravurtischa pramado moha evacha tamasi edani jayende vivruddhe kurunandana. I already discussed this particular characteristics. There are two ways in which Yoga Sutras describe this, the pramada, etc. We discussed in the last session, but this is very important in this context, the 5 human temperaments, that is kshiptam, modham, vikshiptam, ekagram, niruddham, of which the first 2 stages correspond to a state of abnormality. Means you are when a person in a state of restlessness, not being able to focus on something, or in a state of moron, you become totally inactive. That is kshiptam and modham. In Vikshita state, mind can sometimes do good things, but not always. Suddenly, the mind moves in the opposite direction, like the pendulum of a clock which moves from one end to another end, all the time moving from one extreme to another extreme. That Vikshittam. At a higher level is Ekagram. Slowly, mind becomes used to concentrating on a single ideal. And Niruddham, the highest state. Now, here, Aprakasha. Aprakasha means a state of total confusion and ignorance. So, light corresponds to knowledge in Vedanta, and darkness corresponds to ignorance. So, Aprakasha means a state where there is no light. So, we can always see that. For example, when you teach a new mathematical formula or you give a new lesson to small students in kindergartens, when they learn a new word, when they get a new knowledge, suddenly there is a light in their eyes. So all forms of knowledge correspond to some kind of an inner light within. It lights up a light within us. So aprakasha means lack of discerning wisdom. Not lack of intellectual understanding necessarily, but it means lack of absence of discerning wisdom. We call viveka in Sanskrit. Means aviveka that is aprakasha. Apravritti, laziness, inaction, not being able to do anything, total confusion. Pramada, all these are considered to be antarayas in the yoga tradition, and many of the commentators like Madhusudana, who wrote commentaries mostly based on Yoga Sutras and Shankara Bhashya, he describes these characteristics in the light of 9 obstacles or antarayas from Yoga Sutra. Vyadhi, Sthana, Samsaya, Pramada, Alasya, Aviradi, Bhranti Darshana, Alabdha Bhumigattum, Anavasthidattum, Tvani, Chitta Vikshepaha, Tay Antarayaha. So, 9 types of distractions or 9 types of mental obstacles in spiritual life. Not necessarily in spiritual life alone. Any task, when we try to do something good that we know it is good for us, and we are fully sincere, focused on doing that, but mind creates an invisible stumbling block. We can't move beyond that. And these obstacles manifest in 9 different forms according to yoga psychology, according to Patanjali's Yoga Sutra. It comes in the Samadhipada, it comes the 30th Sutra. That is Vyadhi, Sthana, Samsaya, Pramada, Alasya, Abhiradi, Bhranti Darshana, Alabdha Bhumigattum, Anavasthidattum. It essentially means some kind of physical illness, then maybe some sort of incapacity to do things, and then mind not being fully focused on something. But in this particular verse, in the 13th verse, some of the problems discussed here, for example, Tamo guna. One is aprakasha. Aprakasha means all kinds of ignorant notions, bhranti darshanas. Then apravritti, it's called alasya. So alasya or laziness is considered to be a natural obstacle of the mind when we try to do something. Physical laziness. Or samsaya, after doing for some time, we feel a kind of confusion whether we are doing the right thing or not. Samsaya means self-doubt. Pramada. Pramada also is a kind of inner conflict and confusion, ignorance. So again, after achieving something, we feel, well, I have not achieved anything. So mind playing tricks on itself. Our own mind playing tricks on itself are the characteristics of persons endowed with a predominant element of Tamoguna. That's why great teachers like Vivekananda and other modern exponents of Vedanta, they tell you, you should do something. It's far better to do something good or try to do something good than doing nothing. Because doing nothing is the most perilous, the most dangerous state of human mind. It's called Mudam and Kshiptam and Mudam. The first and second, the lowest types of human vrittis, human mental conditions is called Vikshiptam and Mudam. Third is Vikshiptam. In Vikshiptam there is a confusion, at least there is some activity. So, apravritti, laziness, inaction, pramada, etc. So, the point is, a person should always try to avoid falling into the precipice of Tamoguna. Because Tamoguna can forever prevent our spiritual growth. So, apragasho, apravritti, pramada, all kinds of confusion, misunderstanding, moha, a misapprehension, evacha, tamas yadani jayante vivirdhe kurunantana. Tamoguna is the worst because Tamoguna is almost like you get caged or you get imprisoned within a box. You don't get out. It's a more dangerous thing. So whenever we feel lazy, we should try to do something creative. Because when we try to do something creative, we are moving away from Tamoguna. We are slowly climbing the steps. We are trying to do something creative. So any kind of creative activity is better than inaction, because inaction leads to laziness, inaction leads to ignorance, confusion, and it blocks our spiritual growth once for all. This is the 13th verse. And now in the 14th verse, Lord Krishna says, Yada sattve pravurdhetu pralayam yadi deha bhrud tadottama vidam lokan amalan pradivadhyade. Now, in this 14th and 15th verse, another important subject is taken up. How these characteristics continue to affect and influence our destiny, even in our next life. How it continues to influence us in our next life. Yada sattve pravurdhetu pralayam yadi dehagabhrita. Yada dehagabhrit sattve pravurdhetu pralayam yadi. Suppose a fortunate person who has done a lot of spiritual disciplines, who attained a lot of Sattvaguna, a lot of good qualities, spiritual qualities. If he dies in that state of mind, what happens? He will be born again in a community or in a surrounding where he can continue his spiritual journey. In between these two life cycles, he will spend this time in some higher levels of existence. This is a Hindu belief. So first I will explain this. It has something to do with the Hindu concept of doctrine of karma and the doctrine of reincarnation. So whatever we do in our life, in this life, our actions produce two types of results. The first result is very obvious. The second one, it is deeply deposited in our mental system. When we do something good, the good action does something good for others, but it does something wonderful for us. It generates a spiritual asset, a vritti. These vrittis, good vrittis become good vasanas, vasanas become samskaras, samskaras again influence our actions in next life, and we are born again with a let's say, spiritual bank balance of good samskaras. When you are born again with these samskaras, because you have done a lot of good actions in a previous life, including spiritual disciplines, including a lot of charity perhaps, you have generated a lot of spiritual energy, spiritual samskaras, which in your system. You are born again, what happens is, you have a natural tendency to continue your spiritual journey from where you left in your previous life. So that's why Gita in the 6th chapter, Purvabhyasena tenaiva hriyadepi avashopi saha jignasurabiyogasya shabda brahmadi vartade. If you have done something good in your previous life, if you had meditated in your previous life, if you have read the Bhagavad Gita in your previous life, then when you are born again, naturally your mind will go in the direction of those good samskaras that you have earned, that you have built up in your own mental system. One may ask this question: when we are reborn, when we are not reborn with the same mind, with the same senses. It is true that we are not reborn with the same senses, but we are reborn with the same mental system in the form of samskaras and tendencies. So we inherit from a previous life all the accumulated samskaras and vasanas. That's why Purvabhyasena tenaiva hriyadevi avashopi. Avasha means you are helpless. You have done a lot of good things in the past. So you cannot do anything nasty in this life because you have built up a good stock of good samskara. Samskara means tendencies. Roughly translates into the English word tendencies, more or less. Not a very accurate translation. But that's what they are trying to do by translating this into English. So a lot of good samskaras, tendencies, impressions you have built up in previous life. So you are helpless. You do something good. Then Gita says, Tatradam buddhi samyogam labhade paurvadekikam yatadecha tadhu bhuya samsiddho kurudantana. So, your previous body, that is purvadeki. There is buddhi samyogam, all the tendencies, impressions, vasanas, samskaras, all that are built up, that are accumulated in a previous life with good actions, good thoughts, spiritual disciplines, or maybe practice of charity, compassion and others. So, they reconnect. You are able to reconnect with those samskaras when you are born again. So, you continue this spiritual journey. That's why here Lord Krishna says, Yada sattve pravurdhetu pralayam yadi. Pralayam actually means death. Somebody who has done a lot of good things. That's why, it is said, we should learn not only to live intelligently, sensibly, we also should learn how to die intelligently. It's an important thing. Dying with intelligence, dying in a very intelligent manner. Anayasena maranam vina dainyena jivanam dehi me kripaya shambho tvai bhaktim achanchala means. It's an ancient prayer, means a good householder should pray for a pleasant, more or less happy life, and also a effortless, pleasant death. So, this idea behind. So, in this 14th verse, Lord Krishna is actually talking about the effects of good actions and Sattvagunas, or rajogunas, tamogunas, and how they influence our destiny, not only in this life, but also in the next life. But remember, these ideas can be properly understood only when we accept these two doctrines of the law of karma and the law of reincarnation. Every action produces a result other than what we see in front of us right now. And that result doesn't die, doesn't disappear when the action is over. The result in the form of a subtle tendency is deposited in our mind. If that is good, that bears fruits, not only in this life, next life. That's the idea behind. So, That's what the idea becomes clear in the Gita elsewhere, where Arjuna is asking one question. Ayadi saddhayo pedo yogat chalidamanasaha aprapya yoga samsiddhim kam katim krishna gaccha. This is a simple question that every spiritual seeker should ask. Suppose you attended Vedanta classes for years, you have meditated, you may have gone to church, you may have attended Sabbath every Sunday, done a lot of good things in your life, but suppose you feel you have not attained much, and suppose you die, 100 years old, you'd still die because still you have not become fully enlightened. What does it mean? Does it mean that all your efforts have gone down the drain? So Lord Krishna, that's a question that Arjuna is putting to Krishna. Ayati means somebody who has not become a yeti yet, not yet fully become enlightened. But lot of concentration, lot of sense of sanctity and sacredness. You have prayed, you have meditated, you have read scriptures, you have done a lot of good things, but still not fully attained. But yoga charita manasaka. Sometimes there may be some deviation from spiritual disciplines, some problems. Does it mean that everything will be lost? So, in answer to this, Lord Krishna says, Partha naiveha namutra vinasastasya vidyate. Tasya vinashaha na vidyate. What it means is, he will never lose anything, he will not be lost. Why? Because whatever you have done in this life, even you have meditated only for a few days, that won't go in waste, that won't be waste. Why? Because that will bear fruits in the next life. We have planted a seed, and the seed will sprout, maybe not in this life, next life. So no good action, not a moment of spiritual practice will be a waste. That's the idea behind. So that's why here Lord Krishna says, Yada sattve pravruddhi. Suppose you have done a lot of good actions and you have attained a lot of Sattvaguna. And pralayam yadi, dekha prata. As a person dies. Tadottama vidam lokan amalan padivadyade. What happens? That person will go to a higher region, higher realm, and stay there with enlightened beings in the higher levels. And then, of course, after some time, he'll be born again in the family of spiritual seekers and in an atmosphere, in an environment where he will naturally be able to continue his spiritual evolution, his spiritual journey in next life. So that's the idea behind. Rajasi pralayam gitva karma sangishu jayate tatha pralinat tamasi mudhayonishu jayate. It's another thing. Now, suppose we have not done much meditation, but spent all our lifetime perpetually working hard, making money, making more money, trying to succeed more and more, always being engaged in some kind of activity or other. Those persons will be born, but he'll be born among people who are hyperactive. So there is a progress, but progress is very, very slow. And at some point, this hyperactive person who is ambitious, one day he will start realizing that he may attain a lot of success, make a lot of money, but that's not going to bring him happiness for all time. And then slowly he will turn his mind to in some other direction. He may go to the university library, read a book on Sermon on the Mount or the Bhagavad Gita, he may read, Dhammapada he may read, or he may step into a spiritual place where he may join a prayer, may listen to spiritual conversations, spiritual lectures. Slowly he may turn his mind in one direction or other, which Patanjali says, Atha Yoga Anushasana. You work hard, make a lot of money, lot of fighting, lot of competition, and then finally you find you knock at different doors don't open, atha means then you turn your mind in another direction. You may go and start reading a Bible or Bhagavad Gita or something else. Or you may start discussing meditation, things like that. Because money is not enough. Money doesn't bring happiness. So atha means. So that's why he rajasit pralayam gatva karma sangishu jayate. The point is, unless we try to turn our mind in some spiritual direction, we won't be making 1 inch progress in our life. This cycle, or we call it a wheel, a wheel that is rotating perpetually all the time. Action, success, long life, death. Again action, again success, again long life, death. So this wheel continues rotating. A wheel doesn't have a beginning or end or a middle. So the way to come out of the wheel is to turn our mind in some spiritual direction. It could be in the form of reading the Bible if you are a believing Christian, that's wonderful, or a Buddhist according to your tradition, or a Hindu, whatever may be. Somehow turning the mind away from the world and in the direction of the higher values, spirituality. Then we slowly start getting out of this rotating wheel. That's the idea behind. So, rajasi pralayam gatva karma sangishu jayade tatha pralinas tamasi mudhayonishu jayade. Lord Krishna says, the last sentence is very interesting. He says, those who never turn their mind either in the direction of action or in the direction of contemplation, those people, well, they continue being born again one after another. The wheel continues moving again and again. This is the idea behind. That's why in the 14th verse, Lord Krishna made this very clear. Yada sattve prabuddhetu pralayam yadi dekha prati. So those who are able to accumulate lot of sattvic qualities and are able to die in that state of mind, they will certainly reach the highest region. That's why, of course, at the beginning, before the class continues, a short story which I may have repeated sometime in the past. The story is Parikshit. Parikshit was a philosopher king. So philosopher king is a philosopher because he's a sage, and also he's a king, Rajarshi, that's a term used in Vedantic tradition. Gita itself, if you go to the 4th chapter, imam vivasude yogam proktavan aham avyayam vivaswan manave praha manhu ikshakave abravit evam parampara praptam imam rajasya viduhu sakalena iha mahada yogo nashta parandava. So you have got the course yoga studio here. That's not the yoga we are talking about. That yoga is very important, but that is only a fraction of a higher yoga called the philosophy of yoga, the spiritual yoga. I mean, practicing spiritual values in our everyday life. It's the real meaning of yoga. That yoga is being practiced by great kings in the past. They were kings and also they were philosophers, like Plato's Republic, philosopher king idea. The word is called Rajarshi. Raja is a king, Rishi is a philosopher, a saint. So Shankaracharya in his commentary says Rajanasya Rishayasya Rajasya. People kings, rulers who are philosophers because they were so advanced in their contemplative faculties, and kings because they were very efficient rulers or monarchs. In the higher commentaries of Shankarananda Saraswati, the Tika, he says Rajattam Aishwarya Sambati Rishittam Tasyaha Sukshmartha Darsana Kshamattam. Who is a philosopher king? So Rajattam implies prosperity, wealth, success. You are a CEO of a big company, you are the President of the United States. All these are examples of the position of a king or a monarch. Rishitvam is something different. the ability to see the limitation of where wealth stops, the ability to look beyond material success, the capacity to look beyond material success. That is called Rishitvam, the ability of a saint or king, sorry, not a king, but a saint or sage or a philosopher. So, Parikshit was such a philosopher king. But one day he made a terrible blunder. What he did, the whole story goes like this, one day he was going around in a forest and he was tired, hungry and thirsty, and he found a small hermitage. He entered the hermitage and he found an old rishi, a saint, immersed in meditation, and he wanted some drinking water. The sage was immersed in meditation. He didn't see the king entering the hermitage. So the sage didn't know anything, and the king got angry and he came out and he looked around. He found a dead snake lying about outside the hermitage. He lifted it in his bow and put it in the neck of the sage and went away. And when the sage's son came to know of this, he put a curse on anyone who had done such a terrible, heinous thing, putting a dead snake in the neck of a meditating sage. So this happened, and then the king came to know of this, and the king was not angry. He thought he deserved a punishment. He left his kingdom, left his palace. He was not angry. Rather, he realized he made a mistake and he deserved this curse. And he came to the banks of river Ganga, sat there on meditation. This is the story goes. And at that time, another sage came there. His name was Sukha. And when this sage appeared, the king put one question to him: what should a dying man do? The curse was that he would be killed by snake bite. A snake will bite him and he will die on the seventh day. That was the curse. Anyway, so what should a dying man do? A man who knows he has only 7 days to live, why should he live? What should he do? So, Atha Prichami Samsiddhim Yoginam Paramam Gurum Purushasyeha Yatkaryam Mriyamanasya Sarvatha. This is the question that the king puts the great sage Sukha. So, what should a dying man do? A man who knows only 7 days for him to live. So then the king continues this question, whom should I meditate, and so on. The answer is given by Sukha. The answer to the question. The answer is, Edavan Sankhya Yogabhyam Sudharma Parinishtaya Janma Labha Parapumsam Ante Narayana Smriti. Whether you practice Karma Yoga, Jnana Yoga, or Bhakti Yoga, whatever may be, you should be able to leave this world with God's name in your lips and God's form in your heart, and with God's thought in your buddhi, in that mind. This is how every person should live, means the ability to leave the world with a smile, without worry. Now, this is possible only when we try to accumulate a lot of sattvic qualities. Sattvic qualities means doing good actions, good thoughts, good words, either spiritual disciplines in our own inner life or acts of compassion, kindness for others. These are two different ways of generating spiritual energy, which will make us more and more sattvic. So this is the particular part of this chapter ends here with the 15th verse. From 16th verse onwards, we will start another discussion. Now we can have interaction. You are most welcome with questions. Most welcome.
Does your family's karma reflect on your karma when you're born into a new family?
Could you repeat once more the question?
Does your family's karma affect your karma when you're born into a new family?
No, family's karma will not affect. Because basically we are all individual travelers. We don't evolve in groups. In spiritual life, we are all individual travelers. But our actions, our thoughts can influence the kind of family in which we may be born. Because, in the Gita itself, it is said, if you have done a lot of spiritual disciplines, if you are an advanced spiritual seeker, then you will be born in a family of great renunciates. Suppose you have practiced a lot of renunciation, a lot of self-denial, a lot of asceticism in your life, then you will be born in a family where you will be able to naturally evolve further where you have stopped in this life. But suppose in another case, these are two examples given in this in the Gita. Another example is given. So there are those who want wealth, success, happiness, and also they also practice meditation, spiritual disciplines, both going together. But they have not yet reached a state of complete renunciation, complete dedication to the spiritual ideal alone. Along with their dedication to spiritual ideal and spiritual disciplines, they also have ambitions for wealth and success and so on. They'll be born in a family where they will be able to fulfill their unfulfilled desires and go further beyond. So these two options are mentioned in the Gita. Very natural. So if you are sincere seekers and if you also pray for wealth, there is nothing wrong. For householders, for people living in this world, wealth, success, all these are necessary. You cannot expect them to practice renunciation. It's not everyone is not like a Buddha, obviously. So, I mentioned the kings are also great spiritual personalities, though they were not men of renunciation in the formal sense because they were ruling monarchs. So, there is nothing wrong if you pray for all that you need, but also practice prayer, meditation and other spiritual disciplines. Then you will be naturally born to the next stage of evolution. You will be born in a family where the circumstances will conduce you to your further progress. This idea behind it. It's clear?
Yes, thank you.
So we'll conclude now. Do you have any, Brian? Yeah.
Swamiji. Namaskar, Swamiji. So you talked about the 5 types of temperaments and also the 5 type of temperaments and also the antarayas in the Yoga Sutras about, was it Samadhipada verse 30?
Yeah.
And also, and you obviously mentioned the Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas. So is Sattva the way to change the temperaments and to deal with antarayas, to promote more Sattva in your life? I was wondering if you could link those concepts together maybe, or explain a little more of the temperaments with the antarayas and the Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas.
These antarayas are stated to be obstacles to achieving chitta prasada. That's the context. So if you look the previous and the succeeding sutras, you'll find antaraya means obstacles in spiritual life. Antaraya is a Sanskrit word which means obstacles in spiritual life. So these obstacles are stated to be, they are said to be obstacles to achieving a kind of inner serenity and peace and inner fulfillment. It's called chitta prasada. So, actually these antarayas are directly linked to rajoguna and tamoguna. For example, you can find Vyadhi is linked to rajoguna, samshaya, pramada, alasya are linked to tamoguna. Nidra, alasya, pramada. So you can find. So these 9 obstacles are found among people who are endowed with a predominant rajoguna or tamoguna. So as you attain more and more Sattvaguna, you are removing all these obstacles. Obstacles naturally disappear as you evolve, as you ascend to higher and higher levels of spiritual progress. And again, towards Chitta Prasada. That's in Yoga Sutra, the goal is attaining Chitta Prasada by Chitta Vritti Nirodha. That's the purpose. And in the 5 temperaments that you mentioned, Kshiptam, Modham, Vikshiptam, Egagram, Niruddham. Actually, this Vikshipta state, it corresponds to Rajoguna, and Kshiptam and Modham correspond to Tamoguna. And Egagra, the first stage in Sattvaguna, and Niruddha stage is fully established Sattvaguna. So these 5 temperaments can be analyzed. They are analyzed according by commentators. There is a great commentator called Yoga Bhashya Vartikam. So that is a great contribution of Yoga Bhashya. So Vijnana Bhikshu and Vajaspati, these 2 commentators who wrote commentaries on Yoga Vartikam and also Vaisharati, Yoga Vaisharati. So they have analyzed that the Tamoguna, Rajoguna, Sattvaguna, the dynamics of human temperament is an excellent analysis of our progress through the practice of Karma Yoga. That the Karma Yoga is mentioned in the first sutra of Yoga Sutra, that is Kriya Yoga. Tapa, Swadhyaya, Isa Pranidhanani, Kriya Yoga. So the Kriya Yoga is linked to Karma Yoga. Any good action that you do, any good action, any noble action, will generate spiritual asset in the mind. And that will slowly remove Rajoguna and Tamoguna and will generate more and more Sattvaguna. It is a natural result of doing good actions. It's the Kriya Yoga. Kriya Yoga of Patanjali system is different from the popular so-called Kriya Yoga. Please note that difference, So it's an interesting. Okay, thank you. Thank you for the question. And now we will conclude. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Tat Sat Sri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu.